over hand and made like 5 bands a day. I was broke, came up with a plan, now I'm the man, it ain't no stopping me. It ain't no stopping me. Got bands, I'ma run it up, it ain't no stopping me. I was broke, came up with a plan, now I'm the man, it ain't no stopping me. Got bands, I'ma run it up, it ain't no stopping me. I done ran up all these bands up in hand and made like 5 bands a day. I was broke, came up with a plan, now I'm the man, it ain't no stopping me. I done ran up all these bands up in hand and made like 5 bands a day. I was broke, came up with a plan, now I'm the man, it ain't no stopping me.
All right, we're here. What's going on, fellas? All right, ladies and gents, glad you can join me. As you come into the room, be sure to hit the thumbs up button to support us in the algorithm. It really helps us out getting to a larger audience, trying to spread our message here. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button, and if you haven't done so already, you gotta smash the subscribe button. Listen, guys, you gotta check out the links in the description. I'm a new author. You can check out my book for the next 30 days. It's a free, available on Amazon. The link is in the description. Also, if you have the desire to support Black attorneys, now is the time to get active. There's more information. Check out the links in the description. With that being said, let's get into it. Tonight, we are talking about the BRICS nations versus the petrodollar. Now, if you don't know, the United States currently has the world reserve currency. And Donald Trump is doing a lot to preserve that status. The Democrats and the Republicans have a split. They have a difference in opinion as far as how to preserve the status of the world dominant currency. And I'm going to tonight break down the difference in their perspectives on this topic. There's a lot to go over here, so let's get right into it. Y'all know on this channel, I like to share clips and give some receipts, some things for y'all to consider. So we've got a lot of clips that we're going to go over. Let's start first of all by explaining the petrodollar, okay? Because this is vital information to understand the global international context, the global international chessboard that we are playing on. You might look at the wars like the war in Ukraine, the war in the Middle East, the wars in the Middle East, and wonder, why is the United States sending so much money overseas? Why are we supporting all of these wars that are so far from our shores that seem like they don't have anything to do with us? Why is the United States spending way more money in grants, not loans, giving money, which will likely not be repaid, to countries like the Ukraine to fight wars against Russia, when the European nations, places like Poland, France, the Baltic states, are much closer, but they're paying much less money, including the EU, they're paying much less money. And why is that? When they're much closer to the threat of Russia. The only way that these things will make sense to you is if you first understand the petrodollar. So with that being said, I'm going to play this clip to sort of explain the petrodollar, come back with some thoughts, and like I said, we've got a lot of clips to go over. So let's start with this one.
The term petrodollar refers to US dollars earned by oil exporting countries through the sale of oil. This system emerged in the 1970s after the US struck a deal with Saudi Arabia to price oil exclusively in dollars. The petrodollar system provided a stable revenue stream for oil-producing nations and created a global demand for US dollars, reinforcing the dollar's status as the world's primary reserve currency. Oil exporting countries reinvest their petrodollars into US assets like treasury bonds, stocks, and real estate. This recycling of petrodollars helps finance the US budget deficit and supports global financial markets. The petrodollar system also ties global energy markets to US monetary policy, giving the US significant influence over international economic stability and geopolitical dynamics. However, with the rise of renewable energy and shifts in global economic power, the future of the petrodollar system is uncertain. Countries like China and Russia are exploring alternatives to reduce their dependence on the US dollar. Thanks for watching.
All right, so you notice as we were hearing that description, that explainer video, and thank you, shout out to them for putting together that explainer video of the petrodollar. Towards the end, they mentioned the fact that Russia and China, two of the major powers in the BRICS nations, are exploring alternatives to the US dollar. Now, as of 2025, Russia has announced that they will no longer exclusively sell their oil using the US dollar, which is the petrodollar. Additionally, Saudi Arabia in 2024, which is the main, not only benefactor, but supporter up until this point since the 1970s, the main supporter of the petrodollar outside of the United States has been Saudi Arabia. But in 2024, while Joe Biden was president, Saudi Arabia announced that they would no longer exclusively observe the petrodollar. So there are a lot of changes, developments happening around the petrodollar, and these BRICS nations are heavily involved in the shift away from it. Now, before we get into the BRICS nations, I have a few things that I want to point out. Number one, what are the BRICS nations? I'd be remiss if I didn't explain that. The BRICS nations, in case you aren't aware, is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. These were the first 5 BRICS nations to sign on to the BRICS platform. Since those first 5 countries signed up and agreed to take part in the BRICS nations, the BRICS conglomerate, additional countries such as Ethiopia and the UAE, United Arab Emirates, have also joined the BRICS nations. And many countries are applying and waiting to be accepted as BRICS allies. So this is something that we as the general public should be aware of, but make no mistake about it, our politicians, our leaders are definitely hyper aware and hyper concerned with this growing threat to our world dominance. With that being said, I want to take it back to General Wesley Clark. In 2003, I believe, he first came with an interview on Democracy Now!, where he mentioned 7 countries in 5 years that the United States had identified to overthrow. Now, in 2001, after 9/11, this was when General Wesley Clark was first told that these 7 countries have been identified to be toppled. I want you to pay attention to the countries which were identified, which were called out. And mind you, as you're listening to this clip, keep in mind that this clip was recorded in 2003, well before these countries were actually toppled. Check this out.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Finishing off Iran.
The truth is about the Middle East is, had there been no oil there, it would be like Africa. Nobody is threatening to intervene in Africa. The problem is the opposite. We keep asking for people to intervene and stop it. And there's no question that the presence of petroleum throughout the region has sparked great power involvement. Whether that was the specific motivation for the coup or not, I can't tell you, but there's always been this attitude that somehow we could intervene and use force in the region.
I'm going to take it back just so you can hear those 7 countries again. Just off the top of my head, I remember Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Somalia, Sudan, finishing off with Iran. All right. And I know there were 7, so let's see which one I missed. Let's take it back here.
He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
So the one I missed was Libya. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, finishing it off with Iran. If you haven't been paying attention to the countries that were mentioned in that list back in 2003, go and do your research. You will see that all of those countries, with the exception of Iran, have been toppled via United States involvement, instigating of civil wars like what we saw in Libya in 2014. We see today in 2025, now that Assad in Syria has been toppled, Israel is occupying a third of Syria today. Go back and do your research. Google it. Google how much land Israel is occupying in Syria right now today, just like General Wesley Clark predicted. Not only that, we already know about Iraq, we see Syria, we see Libya. We know that Somalia and Sudan have been heavily bombarded with drones, even dating back to the Obama administration. Drones were heavily leveraged to destroy a lot of infrastructure and a lot of personnel within the Somalia, Sudan, and AFRICOM nations. Go Google AFRICOM, do your research on that. Lastly, the last on that list was Iran, and that's what I want folks to pay specific attention to these days, now that Donald Trump is president, because Donald Trump has made a lot of statements disparaging Iran. We know that in Donald Trump's first term, he canceled the Iran nuclear deal, which Obama signed. And ever since then, Donald Trump reneged on the United States agreed upon deal with Iran, it has been all bad blood between Donald Trump and Iran. Now, giving credit where credit is due, Donald Trump is trying to get us out of the war, the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. And my personal opinion, my personal prediction is the reason he's trying to get us out of the war with Ukraine and Russia is because he wants to pivot our attention to the Middle East, particularly with Iran. And as I was preparing for this tonight's live, it just occurred to me how long I've been tracking this. Back in, I want to say 2012, I took these pictures. At that time, I was still in the Army. I was a young cadet at this time. Y'all can see me with my squad here. And this is when I first really started paying attention to I lost it. It recycled. That's when I first really started paying attention to these things. And President Barack Obama, when he invaded Libya, or when he instigated the civil war in Libya and killed President Gaddafi, which led the richest country in all of Africa at the time, he turned Libya from the richest country into a failed state with open air slave markets. That's really when I started to wake up and realize that, and realize the power and the devastation that has been caused by trying to hold on to the petrodollar. Because the petrodollar, Gaddafi, the reason Libya was destroyed per General Wesley Clark's prediction, which I just played, in accordance with the prediction that General Wesley Clark made, Libya was destroyed because President Gaddafi was trying to create an African currency called the gold-backed dinar. It was going to be an African currency backed by gold, and that is why Libya was destroyed. Similarly, Iraq, despite having no involvement in 9/11, Iraq was destroyed because Saddam Hussein, the leader of Iraq at the time, decided that he would no longer support the petrodollar and would instead sell his oil with the euro. All right, go back and do your research and see when Saddam Hussein decided to sell his oil. Saddam Hussein decided, the president of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, decided to sell Iraqi oil in euro, and months later, Iraq was invaded. Go and do your research on the gold-backed dinar, Saddam Hussein selling oil in Europe, and the invasion of Iraq. All right, and I just showed that image of me back in the army just to date myself a little bit, and just show I've been tracking these things for a long time. This has been something that's on my mind as far as something that we need to bring to the attention of the masses, the American masses who might not know. So I'm glad, to this day, I'm still able to do my part as a U.S. citizen to try to wake up my fellow compatriots to the fact of what our government is doing in order to allow us to live our lives in luxury. A lot of bloodshed is surrounding that petrodollar, but there are some legitimate threats today to the petrodollar. As I mentioned earlier in tonight's live, Saudi Arabia, one of the biggest proponents of the petrodollar, one of our biggest allies when it comes to the petrodollar, in 2024 has distanced itself and declared it will no longer solely observe the petrodollar. You might not believe me, so check this out.
In a move shaking the global financial landscape, Saudi Arabia has ended its historic agreement with the United States to exclusively sell oil in US dollars. This petrodollar deal, established in 1974, has been a cornerstone of American economic power. Now, Saudi Arabia is free to sell oil in various currencies, potentially weakening the dollar's dominance in international trade. This shift coincides with the growing influence of the BRICS group, which includes major economies like China, India, and now Saudi Arabia itself. BRICS nations are pushing for greater use of local currencies in international transactions, further challenging the dollar's traditional role. The recent wave of geopolitical tensions, particularly the war in Ukraine and sanctions on Russia, has fueled concerns about the security of dollar-denominated assets. Central banks responsible for managing a nation's foreign reserves are increasingly worried about the potential weaponization of these reserves, meaning their seizure or freezing in case of conflict. This has led to a diversification of central bank reserves, with currencies like the euro and yen gaining traction. Additionally, gold is seeing renewed interest as a safe haven asset. Data suggests a potential de-dollarization trend. While the US dollar still holds a dominant position in global reserves of around 55%, its share has been steadily declining from 67% in 2021. Central banks are actively diversifying their holdings towards their currencies and gold. This shift, driven by both economic and political factors, could have significant long-term consequences for global financial markets and the US dollar's position as the world's reserve currency. Business Bureau, WION, World is One.
All right, so you can see here, shout out to them for putting that together, putting that information together for us. Saudi Arabia has already announced they will no longer exclusively recognize the petrodollar. The US dollar has been losing its dominance since 2021, 3 years between 2021 and 2024. Its market share has decreased 12%. Okay, so this is a legitimate concern when you're talking about inflation, when you're talking about, oh, the prices of eggs are so high due to inflation, you're concerned about us printing money. Well, If you think that's our biggest concern, imagine what would happen if the world decided we're no longer going to only do our trades in US dollar. All right. That is a legitimate concern to our Western way of life. And Donald Trump knows that. Not only Donald Trump, but the Republicans and the Democrats both know and acknowledge this. Now, here is something that I wanted to call out. Now that I've explained what the petrodollar is, I've given some information regarding the bloodshed and how these wars, the military-industrial complex, is affected or implicated by the need to defend the U.S. petrodollar. Now that I want to say that, let me explain the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats' views on the petrodollar. So specifically when it comes to Russia, again, let's think about the main partners of the petrodollar, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. We see, starting off with the low-hanging fruit, let's take a look at South Africa. Right now, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are very vocal in their condemnation of South Africa. They're trying to highlight the fact that there are land reform policies that are currently taking place in South Africa to redistribute the stolen land back to the black masses. Right now, the European settlers, the European colonizers have the vast majority of land and wealth in South Africa, thanks to apartheid, thanks to the history of apartheid and colonization in South Africa. The black masses are now pushing back to this unfair distribution of wealth and saying, hey, we need to redistribute the land back to the black masses. There is significant push from Donald Trump, the Republicans, Elon Musk, against these policies, and they're using that as a way to begin to target South Africa. Donald Trump has announced his plans to target South Africa with sanctions, and they're number one going after the low-hanging fruit. With Elon Musk being from South Africa, he's been very vocal about what's going on. And I just want to play a quick clip from Donald Trump referring to South Africa. Check this out.
You're going to have a tariff. So what they're...
Uh-oh.
Why South Africa?
It's only South Africa. Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that.
And why South Africa?
It's only South Africa.
All right, so we can see Donald Trump calling out South Africa, specifically the land redistribution policies. And Donald Trump is they're not only concerned about the land redistribution, let's be real. What they're doing is they're targeting the BRICS nations. Okay, if you notice, a lot of on the international scale, on the international board, a lot of the policies that Donald Trump is making his flagship policies have something to do with the BRICS nations. Whether it be the Ukraine-Russia war, Russia is a BRICS nation. Whether it be the tariffs that Donald Trump has put on China and Canada, 25% tariffs on China. That is because China is a BRICS nation. Donald Trump is trying to split up the BRICS nations by targeting them with sanctions and tariffs. Not only that, he's trying to divide and conquer the BRICS nations by working with Russia. What he's trying to do, he recognizes that Russia and China together, when Russia and China are unified, that is a legitimate threat because they are both nuclear powers with substantial and significant resources and personnel. China has over 1 billion people. They've got significant resources. They've got significant personnel numbers. They've got significant weaponry and technology as far as cyber attacks, capabilities. Russia and China together are a legitimate threat to the United States hegemony. So what Donald Trump is trying to do is, instead of fighting with Russia like the Democrats want. Donald Trump would rather divide and conquer. Hey, let's have peace with Russia. Russia, we should be friends. Russia, we could give you some security guarantees. We don't need Ukraine as a NATO ally. Russia, let's just distance Russia from China and we'll call it even. Let's make a deal, right? That's something that we saw in the Zelensky Trump debacle when they had that meeting. One thing Donald Trump is pushing, let's make a deal with Russia. Why? Because Donald Trump wants to drive a wedge between Russia and China by dealing with Russia, making a peace deal with Russia, but then targeting China with tariffs, targeting China with an economic war, targeting China. China just announced today, hey, we're not scared to have a direct combat with America. So the heat and the tensions between the United States and China are rising. But they can't have China and Russia together when the United States goes to war against China. So Donald Trump's ideology, Donald Trump's philosophy, Donald Trump's approach is to deal with Russia, make a deal with Russia, and drive a wedge between Russia and China. The Democrats, on the other hand, the Democrats recognize the threat of the BRICS nations as well. But what the Democrats want to do, at least as it refers to Russia, is the Democrats want to drain Russia of resources. We saw Joe Biden trying to use Ukraine as a proxy war, a proxy state to war against Russia and drain their coffers. We're going to target Russia under the Democratic philosophy. The Democrats want to target Russia and basically bankrupt their economy. They're trying to drain their personnel with a conflict against Ukraine, and they're trying to drain their coffers, drain their banking, their money by targeting their banking system. You might not believe me. Let's play another clip. You know I come with some receipts. Check this out.
Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia. This is going to impose severe cost on the Russian economy, both immediately and over time. We have purposely designed these sanctions to maximize the long-term impact on Russia and to minimize the impact on the United States and our allies. I want to be clear, the United States is not doing this alone. For months, we've been building a coalition of partners representing well more than half the global economy. 27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and many others, to amplify the joint impact of our response. I just spoke with the G7 leaders this morning, and we're in full and total agreement. We will limit Russia's ability to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen to be part of the global economy. We'll limit their ability to do that. We're going to stunt the ability to finance and grow the Russian military. We're going to impose and we're going to impair their ability to compete in high-tech 21st century economy. We've already seen the impact of our actions on Russia's currency and the ruble, which early today hit its weakest level ever in history. The Russian stock market plunged today. The Russian government borrowing rates spiked by over 15%. In today's actions, we've now sanctioned Russian banks that together hold around $1 trillion in assets. We've cut off Russia's largest bank, a bank that holds more than 1/3 of Russia's banking assets by itself, cut it off from the U.S. financial system. And today, we're also blocking 4 more major banks. That means every asset they have in America will be frozen.
Every asset they have in America will be frozen. Now, this is the thing. That was Joe Biden's policy when Joe Biden was in office. But this backfired. Joe Biden and the Democrats' philosophy, their approach backfired. Because by targeting Russia's economy, by freezing the Russian banks, the Russian assets, what that did was it sent shockwaves around the world. Now China, India, Korea, North Korea, all countries which have any type of hesitancy towards working with the United States are now aware that whenever the United States feels like it, whenever they get the inkling to, they have the ability and will cut out and freeze your banking assets. Now, if you're a rich oligarch living in Russia, if you're an oligarch living in China, if you're an oligarch living in somewhere in Africa, anywhere in the Middle East, anywhere, you're seriously considering how much money do I want to keep in the Western markets, in the United States market, when I know that any day, anytime a military conflict should arise with the United States, the first thing they can and will do is take our money. They will freeze our money, which some international courts have declared illegal, but that's another story for another day. All right, guys. So there, I'm just calling that out. I want to highlight the difference between the approach between the Democrats and the Republicans, at least as it relates to Russia. The Democrats are much more confrontational. They are both have issues with the BRICS nations, but the Democrats' approach of we're going to drain Russia's economy has largely backfired and can be directly attributed to the reason behind Saudi Arabia, for example, in 2024, while Joe Biden was still president, deciding not to exclusively uphold the petrodollar. And again, this war between China, the BRICS nations, and America rages on. Here's Donald Trump, as I mentioned earlier, announcing that he will place tariffs on China. In his first term, we already know that he started an economic war, a trading war with China. Now in his second term, he hasn't backed off of that. Instead, he's doubling down with these tariffs. Y'all check this out.
Have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things. But so we're going April 2nd. But very importantly, tomorrow tariffs 25% on Canada and 25% on Mexico, and that'll start. So they're going to have a tariff. So what they have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things in the United States, in which case they have no tariffs. In other words, but so we're going April 2nd. But very importantly, tomorrow tariffs 25% on Canada and 25% on Mexico, and that'll start. So
25% tariffs on China. All right. And I just wanted to call out, hey, this is going to be a short live tonight. I just wanted to call this out and bring it to folks' attention that the reasoning, a lot of people might be confused as to why the United States is even involved in this war between Ukraine and Russia, why Donald Trump is starting these trade wars and these putting tariffs on these countries like China. Make no mistake about it. The fact that these BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, have openly declared war on the petrodollar, saying we will not exclusively recognize the US dollar, the US petrodollar, as the world's global currency, the world's only currency with which oil can be traded. The fact that the BRICS nations are putting up a fight against that is a legitimate threat. Donald Trump is not unaware of this threat. Neither of the Democrats. But the Democrats' approach to handling it was largely backfiring. Donald Trump, it seems like he's attacking this head on, and we'll see the results. We'll see the results, whether they be good or bad. Make no mistake about it. A lot of this is being fueled, no pun intended. A lot of this is being fueled by the war against the petrodollar via the BRICS nations. All right, guys, I hope this explained and spurred some thought in you. I hope you gained some education, some information from watching tonight's live. If you got any value from watching, be sure to hit hit the thumbs up button to boost us in the algorithm and help the message get spread to a larger audience. Also, if you haven't done so already, you gotta smash the subscribe button for more content just like this. I'm dropping a lot more content these days. I'm trying to drop a video and a live 5 days a week, every weekday, with one video and one live on the weekends, depending on my availability. So I'm trying to get you guys a lot more content. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. I'm trying to take an opportunity, keep you guys informed of things that are going on. So be sure to hit the subscribe button to boost us in the algorithm. Also, guys, in the link in the description, I've got some links in my description. Check out the description. Right now, I've got a book called The Chronicles of Big Mistake. I'm a new author. That book is available for the next 30 days for free. All right, it's going to jump up in price, but for the next 30 days, it's a promotional price. You can check it out for free. It's a Chronicles of Big Mistakes. So this is issue 1, but there's going to be a series. All right, first 30 days, this is free. You can get the first one. After that, that one will be charged. I'll upload the second book, The Chronicles of Big Mistake Part 2, and then we'll go series for series. But for now, you can check out my book, The Chronicles of Big Mistake. The link is in the description. Also, I'm saving to go back to law school, guys. Right now, more than ever, we need black attorneys. We need black attorneys to fight for reparations. Y'all know I push on this channel reparations a lot. Right now, we need black attorneys to fight the rise of vigilanteism. Donald Trump just called to pass a law making any person who kills an officer eligible for the death penalty, automatic death penalty. Right now, police rights are going up, but citizens' rights, who do you think will be affected? I'll leave it to you. But right now, I'm of the opinion that we need black attorneys more than ever. So I'm putting my chips together. I'm putting my money in my savings account, trying to go back to law school so I can be a better benefit to the black community. If you agree with me and you think that we need more black attorneys, help me out. Hit the link in the description. All right, with that being said, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.